A nostalgic walk through the supermarket shelves. Today, we're going to talk about the American food brands with the longest histories. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, and this is Plain English lesson number 391. The full lesson resources, including the complete transcript, are available at plainenglish.com/391. Now, we usually focus on current events and trending topics, but every once in a while, I like to write a lesson just for fun, and today is one of those days. We're going to talk about the brands on supermarket shelves that have been around the longest, and I'll share a little about the history of these brands. As I said, it's just for fun, but you might enjoy learning a little more about the American diet, for better or for worse, over the years. So, here we go. If you wander the aisles of an American supermarket, you'll see an ever-changing array of branded products ranging from cereal to ice cream, soups to salad dressings, cookies and crackers, ketchup and other condiments, everything you can imagine. And every week, some type of packaged food is new and improved. A recipe is reformulated. Special editions are released. But if you look closely, you'll find that some brands have remarkable staying power. Some packaged foods are the same recipe and same product week in and week out for decades, some for more than a century. I realized this last week as I reached for a familiar yellow cereal box, expecting to put my favorite cereal, Cheerios, into my cart. They changed the packaging to bring back the original name, Cheery Oats, for a limited time to celebrate the 80th anniversary of one of the world's most popular cereals. That means a 90-year-old person today could have had the same cereal for breakfast every day since she was just 10 years old, with no real changes in the recipe and only a slight difference in the name and packaging. And so I got to thinking, what are some of the other famous brands in our grocery store that have been around for a really long time? It turns out that Cheerios isn't even among the very oldest at 80 years old. The original Cheery Oats boasted that they were the world's first ready-to-eat oats. Before they came out, you had to boil your oats with hot water or milk, and Americans did that with Quaker Oats, a brand that is still around today. In fact, in many stores, Quaker Oats are the only kind of traditional oatmeal that you can buy. Quaker Oats was founded on September 4th, 1877, in the town of Ravenna, Ohio. This was the first American trademark for a breakfast cereal. It featured then, and still features today, the image of a Quaker person in traditional dress. Quakers are a movement within the Protestant denomination of Christianity, and they're known for being honest and hardworking. So the first American breakfast cereal was Quaker Oats, and it was trademarked 144 years ago without any big changes to the product or the packaging. Can you believe it? Well, if you'd like to wake up with oatmeal or cereal in the morning, you might also want a cup of hot coffee to go along with that. Way back in time, if you wanted coffee at home, you had to buy green coffee beans, roast them yourself, grind them, and then add hot water. But in 1850, the Pioneer Steam Coffee and Spice Mills Company started roasting and grinding coffee that could be prepared at home. One of the early employees, J.A. Folger, bought the company, which was thereafter known as Folgers, a brand that is still sold in red containers today. It is the best-selling ground coffee in the United States and is on most supermarket shelves even today, despite the influx of single-cup brewers and more artisanal coffees. Folgers, though, is 171 years old. All right, enough breakfast. Let's talk lunch. If it's a chilly day, you might reach for a red can of Campbell's soup. Anderson and Campbell, later just Campbell's Soup, was founded in 1869. That's 152 years ago. Their big innovation, which put them on the map, didn't come until 28 years later, when the company's president invented the idea of condensed soup. That was in 1897, and it's probably not too different today. You open the can, pour it into a saucepan, add 2 cans full of water, and heat it up. Just a few minutes of effort, and you have 2 servings of hot chicken noodle soup, the company's most famous product. A bowl of soup is better with crackers on top. How about those premium soda crackers, also known as saltine crackers? They were first made in 1876 in the town of St. Joseph, Missouri. They're 145 years old and still very popular. If you're not up for a can of soup, maybe you'd like a ham sandwich. Oscar Mayer started in 1883. A German immigrant, Oscar F. Mayer himself, started the company right here in Chicago, Illinois. They started selling bratwurst, liverwurst, and other traditional German sausages before transitioning to ham, bacon, bologna, and hot dogs. Oscar Mayer ham, bacon, hot dogs, and cold cuts are still on supermarket shelves in yellow packaging with red lettering. The Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, an enormous vehicle shaped like a hot dog, patrols America's highways promoting the company's products. The first Wienermobile, I kid you not, was on the road in 1936. If you haven't seen it, it's quite a sight. Well, you can't make a ham sandwich without bread. Wonder Bread started in 1921. That's relatively young in comparison, but it's still 100 years old. Wonder Bread is a loaf of white bread, simple, spongy, nutrition-free, bleached white bread, and a staple of my childhood diet. For something to drink, Pepsi was founded in 1898 and Coca-Cola in 1886. The original Coca-Cola did contain both wine and cocaine. The original recipe was created by an officer that served during America's Civil War. He had been wounded in the war and was addicted to morphine, so he decided to look for a less addictive way to alleviate the pain. After America outlawed alcohol, Coca-Cola was reformulated as a soft drink. Jell-O has been on American tables for dessert since 1897, if you can believe that. You can buy Pillsbury cake mixes too today. Pillsbury has been around since 1872. Americans are not much for spicy food, but when we want to spice things up a little bit, we reach for Tabasco sauce, the very first bottled hot sauce. It's made from Tabasco chilies and was initially produced on an island in the state of Louisiana. They still fill bottles there today, 153 years after it was first produced. Well, this has been a long lesson, and you guys deserve a treat for staying with us so long. In fact, I'll even give you permission to pour yourselves a shot of Jim Beam Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, which was first produced and sold in America in 1795. Here are a few more. The first Oreo cookies came out in 1912, but they didn't become sandwich-like until 1921. So we are also celebrating the 100th year of the Oreo, at least in its current form. If I had known that before I started writing the lesson, I might have made the whole thing about Oreos. Ritz crackers came out in 1934. Kellogg's Corn Flakes came out in 1906. Frosted Flakes is a relative newcomer. They were created in 1952. Pop-Tarts didn't exist until 1964, when people started having electric toasters at home, and now mixing and matching Pop-Tarts flavors is all the rage. Skippy peanut butter started in 1933. Heinz ketchup, get this, Heinz ketchup came out in 1876. You could put Heinz ketchup on, well, I don't know what people put it on back then, but you could have Heinz ketchup before you could turn on a light bulb. The light bulb was invented the next year. Ketchup came first. Priorities, right? Now, unfortunately, not all old brands have aged well. The Quaker Oats Company began marketing a pancake mix under the name Aunt Jemima in 1926, and Uncle Ben's White Rice came out in 1943. But the owners of these brands both decided to retire them this year, saying that they perpetuated racial stereotypes. Today's expression is still around. If something is still around, it means it still exists. If a person is still around, that person is still nearby or continuing to do what they've been doing. Now, it's really important to know the context of this phrase, so let me give you a few examples. The end of the workday might come, and you might ask, hey, is Louise still around? That means, is Louise still here at work? You could be at a party and ask, is Tina still around? That means, is Tina still here at the party? 391 lessons and JR is still around. Can you believe that? He's still putting up with me. He's been the producer for every single one of our 391 lessons and counting. There's a movie coming out in October called Cry Macho, and it will be directed by Clint Eastwood. Did you know he was still around? Trick question, so let me pause here and I'll point out why context is so important. Did you know Clint Eastwood was still around? That could have two different meanings. It could mean, did you know Clint Eastwood was still making movies? That's what he's always been doing, making movies as an actor or a director. He's been doing it for a long time. You could be referring to his movie-making career. But Clint Eastwood is 91 years old. You could also mean, did you know Clint Eastwood was still alive? So be careful with the context when you use still around with a person who's getting up there in years. It's a little easier when talking about a thing. When talking about an object, still around just means something still exists. Many of the brands we talked about today are still around after 100 or 150 years or sometimes more. Folgers Coffee was one of the first brands to roast and grind the coffee, and it's still around today. That means it still exists. It has continued to exist since it was founded. Wonder Bread is still around after a century. Oreos are still around after 100 years. Uncle Ben's rice is not still around. The company still sells the rice, but not under the brand name. So the brand is not still around. They retired it just recently. I just went back to a town where I lived from 2003 to 2005, so about 15 plus years ago. Oxford, Ohio, the town is called. A lot of the restaurants that I remember are still around. Fiesta Chara, Brick Street, Bagel Deli, Skyline Chili, Skipper's, all those places are still around. Those restaurants have not closed, they still exist. Not every place is still around, though. The first place I ever had a burger with a fried egg on top was in Oxford. If you've never had a burger with an egg on top, you're really missing out. Anyway, that place closed down. Unfortunately, that restaurant is not still around. All right, time for JR's Song of the Week. 391 episodes and JR's still around. How about that? He's a key to our success, JR is. Anyway, he picked a Song of the Week, and it is Walking on a Dream by Empire of the Sun. The lyrics talk about two people supporting each other in an exciting endeavor. The lead singer said it described him and his bandmate. So thanks to JR for that one, Walking on a Dream by Empire of the Sun. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed today's lighthearted lesson. I enjoyed taking a walk through American food history. I learned something too. I knew these brands were old, but I had no idea there was Heinz ketchup before there was electrified lighting. Out of all those things, though, that we talked about, the only food I have in my house currently, I think, is Cheerios. I don't think I have any of the other brands. I'm kind of off the dry, packaged food and trying to be more fresh food oriented. I should buy a loaf of Wonder Bread, though, just for fun, just for the memories. Well, we are going to have a live call coming up with Plain English Plus, and I'm positive we are going to talk about this. If you're a Plus member, check your dashboard for the dates and times of our upcoming calls, but I think this will be a lot of fun to talk about. I'd love to hear the oldest brands of food in your countries and whether you recognize any of these brands that we talked about. If you're not a member of Plain English Plus yet, we do live conversation calls a few times a month. We usually start off discussing a recent lesson and move on to other topics. So that's just one of the multiple ways you can practice and upgrade your skills with Plain English Plus. If that sounds like a good fit for you, come join us at plainenglish.com/plus, Plus, and you could be on our next live call. Check it out, plainenglish.com/plus.